for the Midsummer Pride March supporting the LGBTQ community. It's a beautiful day. I'm proud to be here representing Moreland, walking behind so many wonderful, dedicated people. This march goes towards exactly what our values are. At Moreland, we're one community proudly diverse.
More pride! More pride! More pride!
More pride! More pride! More pride!
We are having lots of fun. I like playgrounds too, even ones with very big slides. I like the monkey bars and I like the knots and crosses. I like the monkey bars. I like the clock. We are having lots of fun at this playground. Bye! Bye!
I'm Haikal Raji from A1 Bakery. We've been in Brunswick since 1992. We specialise in Lebanese bread and pastries. We've also introduced a range of Lebanese dishes to our menu. And we've also got a wide range of Lebanese groceries. We like Brunswick because it's very multicultural. Me and my siblings have been here a majority of our lives. This is our second home and we like to treat our customers as our own family. We're very proud in what we do and how we do it.
G'day guys, my name's Chris. I'm here from Moreland City Council just to show you a bit about this tractor and how it works and what we do and how we get around and cut all the grass on the ovals. How's that? Is that better? You want to play tag with the tractor? Your teachers would like that very much.
Goodbye! Bye! Through the gate.
In 2009, Council began research and consultation to identify the key challenges in sport for women and girls within Moreland.
The review identified several issues.
There was a serious lack of female competition and teams.
Only 8% of participants using council sports grounds were female.
To address this inequality, Council introduced a policy to encourage clubs to be more inclusive of women, juniors, people with a disability and people from culturally diverse communities, or risk losing an allocation of a ground to a club that is being inclusive.
Female participation has now increased by 161% in Moreland.
West Coburg Football Club is proud to align with Moreland's policy.
This year we successfully launched the club's first ever under-12 girls footy team.
We're changing our club.
We're changing our culture.
I'm changing the game.
So I'm Claire Johnston and I'm an accredited cricket bat maker and the first female in the world. I learnt how to make cricket bats from Ian Cullen. There's a lot of bats out there for men and I felt that there was an opportunity there to actually work with women to make better bats and to actually make them for their style. So recently I was commissioned to make 5 cricket bats for the Pascoe Vale Headfield Cricket Club for their under-13s girls cricket team. And yeah, to see their faces when they were given the cricket bats was just brilliant. So what I'd really love to be able to do is to keep working with my local community, the local cricket clubs, particularly the women, and yeah, work to make great cricket bats.
My name is Michael Tortoni. I'm the founder of Melbourne's legendary jazz club, Bennett's Lane. I've recently moved to the very cool Brunswick. The Jazz Lab here on Leslie Street, Brunswick is Melbourne's new home of jazz. In my old club, you might have seen Prince for a late night set, or the Wynton Marsalis Band, or even the Harry Connick Jr. Trio. My new club will also host stars of contemporary music, starting with the Bill Frisell Trio for the Melbourne International Jazz Festival, as well as local stars. So drop in for some great music and a drink at the Jazz Lab.
We're going to leave Narelle starting. Narelle, you're going to start? Yeah, because you are. Sorry. That's right, isn't it? Oh, good. Yeah.
Good evening, councillors, members of the gallery and our viewers live streaming tonight's meeting. My name's Narelle Jennings and I'm the Acting Group Manager of City Development. Councillor Dale Martin, who is the chairperson of the Urban Planning Committee, is unwell and is an apology for tonight's meeting. I would like to ask councillors to nominate an interim chairperson and for a motion to elect the interim chairperson.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Anna-Olivia Carly-Hannon.
Do I have a seconder?
A second.
There being no further nominations, Councillor Carly-Hannon will assume the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors and members of the gallery. It is my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's Urban Planning Committee meeting. Our meeting is held on the land of the Wurundjeri people, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past and present, and to any other elders who are with us here this evening. Many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have made Moreland home, and in doing so have contributed to the positive, rich diversity of this municipality. Members of the gallery, please note that this urban planning meeting is being recorded and web streamed live to Council's website and Facebook. This recording will be available on video on demand, and gallery attendees are advised that you will be recorded. Councillors, just a reminder that in line with the adopted councillor conduct principles as outlined in the Councillor Code of Conduct, councillors should ensure that they conduct themselves with integrity, impartially exercise their responsibilities in the interests of the local community, and improperly seek to confer and do not advantage any person. This behaviour will support principles of good leadership and good governance that secure public confidence in the office of councillor. Members of the gallery, in the event of an emergency or disruption, we may be required to take action or to ensure the safety of all attendees. Please follow the directions of council staff and security officers. Thank you for your understanding and cooperation. So in attendance tonight we have our Deputy Mayor, Councillor Natalie Abboud, Councillor Sue Bolton, Councillor Helen Davidson, our Mayor, Councillor John Kavanagh.
Good evening.
Councillor Jess Dorney, Councillor Ali Ufanli, Councillor Mark Riley, Councillor Lambros Tapanos and Councillor Oscar Yildiz, and myself, Councillor Anna-Olivia Carly-Hannon. The officers in attendance tonight are Acting Group Manager, City Development, Narelle Jennings, Acting Unit Manager, Urban Planning, Mark Hughes, Planning Coordinator, Robert Chatford, Unit Manager, Governance, Sally Curran, Principal Urban Planner, Andy Wilson, and Governance Officer, Saskia Hunter. Our apologies tonight are Councillor Dale Martin. Do we have any other councillors that are apologies tonight? No?
I'm happy to move that apology.
Yep, okay. Seconder, Councillor Tapanos. All right, all those in favour? Declare that carried. Councillors, are there any interests or conflicts of interest to declare? No? Okay, if there are no conflicts to declare, I would like to start the meeting. So I'd like to give an outline of how the Urban Planning Committee meeting will run this evening. So the relevant planner will introduce the report and officers' recommendations. I will then let any objectors have the opportunity to move to the lectern and to make their submission. At this time, the applicant will be given the opportunity to speak. If you are making a submission, please clearly state your name and address for the record. You are requested to present viewpoints clearly and concisely, and whether or not you are supporting or opposing the planning application. If you are opposing the planning application, would you please inform the committee why you are opposing and suggest an alternative approach which would satisfy your concerns? Please use the opportunity to focus on your concerns rather than matters of detail in the officer's report. Please note that there is a limit of 3 minutes per speaker, but as chairperson, I reserve the right to reduce or to increase the time available to the speaker. Okay. Could I please have a motion to adopt the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 26th of April 2018? Moved by Councillor John Kavanagh and seconded by Helen Davidson. All those in favour? Yes, that's carried. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't at that meeting. Sorry, I should have made it. Sorry about that.
Okay, Councillor Helen Davidson to move and Councillor Natalie Wood to second. Yep, all those in favour? Great, that's carried.
Apologies.
I also wasn't in attendance at that one. Okay. Okay. The first report we have this evening is 389 to 395 Victoria Street, Brunswick, planning permit application MPS 2017-149. I will move to the officers to present the report.
Thank you, councillors, and good evening, members of the gallery. The first item for this evening is an application to extend the existing warehouse at 389 to 395 Victoria Street, which is currently occupied by Merri-bek pickets. It's a site of approximately 1,740 square metres. It's currently operated for the manufacture and sales of picket fences and associated products. There's 12 employees operating from the site, and the premises have been operating for approximately 25 years. In terms of the site and the context, so the photo in the top left-hand corner is a photo from Victoria Street, the front of the premises. The Talbot Street frontage to the top right-hand corner. At the moment, there's access off Talbot Street, mainly for staff vehicles, and Henkel Street to the rear. The bottom left-hand corner is a gate off Henkel Street. My understanding is it's not permitted to be used for loading and unloading. I'm not aware of where the staff currently use it. In the bottom right-hand corner is a photo of a house currently under construction. The edge of that house will abut the proposed extension. Subject site is zoned industrial 3, light industrial. As you can see on the image on the screen, it actually wraps around Victoria Street and then goes up Percy Street. And then to the north is neighbourhood residential. So there is a sensitive residential interface to the subject site. In terms of the key data of the site, so the proposed extension, 527 square metres. Maximum height of the building is 7 metres. Extends to a length of 40 metres, a width of 13.7 metres, so across the width of the site. There's 6 car parks within the warehouse, 4 in the Victoria Street frontage. So there's 10 car parking spaces on the site. There's no proposal to increase the number of car parks. The planning scheme does actually require an additional 7 car parking spaces. The applicant has sort of variation to that car parking requirement. Probably one of the important things that's come up through the consultation process is noise. There's a dust extractor on the site at the moment, an external dust extractor. The applicant's intention is to replace that with a new unit. That unit will not be flued outside, external to the premises, and it will be contained entirely within the warehouse. There's also some facade works involving a new double-storey veranda to the front of the site. That was part of a 2011 planning permit that has expired. So in terms of 3D elevation of the proposal, so as you can see the front veranda and the proposed warehouse extension to the back. So again, on the right-hand side, the area highlighted yellow is the extent of the extension proposed by the application. I'm taking you through. The top images are the existing elevations, so the existing elevation to Victoria Street and Hinkle Street. At the bottom of the screen, what is proposed. So as you can see, bottom right-hand corner, the proposed north elevation, you'll see the massing of the wall or the built form to the back boundary adjoining that the residential dwelling. Similar height to the existing wall and boundary of the dwelling. What I've shown here, councillors, the existing east elevation, you'll see there's a, as I showed earlier, access point off Talbot Street. One of the conditions contained in the recommendation is a mural be put on the roller door to break up the mass, so to, I guess, just to create a bit of character to the end of the street, soften that extent of concrete. With 21 objections to the application, there was a pitter held back at the end of October. We had 18 objectors attend. Key issues that came out were the height of the development, shadowing, loss of street trees to Hinkle Street, car parking, and as I mentioned earlier, the noise and dust issues. From an officer's perspective, I guess what we see the key issues are noise, as I talked about, car parking. The council's satisfied with the car parking waiver. The residential interface, what officers have done is looked at that interface, particularly with the adjoining dwelling that's currently under construction fronting Hinkle Street, and we've included a condition in the recommendation that the built form be set 5 metres off the common boundary within the same front setback as that dwelling. So you'll actually get a setback, as shown on that in that image, and some landscaping in there. The other issue is the existing use rights. That was a concern of residents. As I mentioned, the use has been operating for 25 years. Back in 1983, council wrote to the applicant and advised them that the use was permitted. So in summary, officers' recommendations as contained within the report before councillors is to issue a notice of decision, subject to conditions, as I mentioned, modifying the setback to Hinkle Street, retention of street trees fronting Hinkle Street, and a mural on the Talbot Street access door. Thank you, councillors.
Are there any objectors or submitters who wish to speak? Yep, please come up to the lectern.
I'm Paul Malatlet, 59 Talbot Street, which directly abuts the Merri-bek property. Two main points I want to make. First of all, I don't believe that the recommendation has properly looked at the impacts of the height on residences. I don't believe anyone has actually come and spoken to residences and had a look at the projected shadows. Rather, they've relied on shadow diagrams. We haven't seen anyone down there from the council to talk to us and to have a look at what impacts it will have, particularly on 59, 57 and other adjoining houses. So the height is my main concern. I also want to bring council's attention to what I think is a matter of trust with the applicant. I have sent to several councillors copies of the original planning permit from 1996, which I hope you've received and noted. I sent it to councillors Tapanos, Riley and Dorney from South Ward, and I made notes on that original application of several points that were stipulated on that permit for the initial extension, and several of those conditions are constantly breached. One of the conditions, this is the council's words, all loading and unloading must generally take place via the Victoria Street loading bay. The Talbot Street entrance must only be used for access to car parking, and the delivery of goods because of their size cannot be unloaded via the Victoria Street loading bay. Now, there is constant loading and unloading of small trucks and utilities that happens in Talbot Street. Next provision that is in breach, the larger door on the northern elevation must be open only when goods are being transferred to or from the yard at the rear of the door. This door is open all day, so that's another important breach. There are several others that I have pointed out that I don't want to spend a lot of time, but the councillors do have those. And so what I'm trying to bring to attention of the council is that the provisions in that original permit have not been adhered to. They continue to be breached.
If you could just start to summarise now.
Yep. So my summary is that I think, first of all, the height is a real issue that council needs to revisit, and also have a look at the track record of the applicant and how they have not adhered to any of the conditions or many of the important conditions in the original application. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, is there anybody else who would like to speak? Yeah.
My name is Jacqueline Kroll. I live at 57 Talbot Street, so next door to Paul and about 5 or 6 metres from the eastern boundary wall of Merri-bek. I'm opposing. My main concerns relate to the wall, its height, and also a general comment about vehicle access, which pertains to both that wall, where I understand the amended proposal has added incorporating an even wider delivery door than exists now. I might have missed it in the original proposal, but it seems to me that's an additional and detrimental inclusion in that amended proposal for the Talbot Street residences and their vehicle access to Victoria Street. So I'm actively involved in the Friends of Talbot and Henkel Streets. You know that we've got a grant from the council a couple of years back. So far, we've spent more than 400 volunteer hours greening up and cleaning up the streets. We got financial help from council, which has helped, if you like, invigorate this. That doesn't take into account the admin hours and the advocacy hours, etc., of the committee, which probably doubles those hours. Talbot Street's especially vulnerable, and I feel like the recommendations from the council really don't address the Talbot Street issues other than that mural on the door. We have terrible amenity already. It's really, really quite a horrible street, and we're working really hard to improve it. We've got just trees now because of the street planting that happened last year, but industry and trucks and so on. I ask you, please do not compromise our amenity further. Please, the council must not support the increase in the height of the wall, all right? Secondly, please, with respect to vehicle access, please do not support increasing the width of that vehicle access in Talbot Street. That sounds to me that the plan is in fact to increase the vehicle use in Talbot Street rather than reduce it, ignoring everything we said in the original objection. Trucks must use the Victoria Street entrance, please. Council, please, must restrict Merri-bek's use of Talbot Street entrance. Going back to Paul's comment, MPS 95/0542, i.e. their previous permit, states that all loading and unloading must generally take place in Victoria Street. It is flouted all the time. Please do not include the width in part of your approval. Please ensure they use Victoria Street. The delivery access, I understand, has been changed a tiny bit for Victoria Street, but where there's no condition or obligation for Merri-bek to use it for their big trucks.
If you could just wind up now.
Yeah, that's it. We please don't compromise our health and wellbeing. It already is kind of tough. We've got this new energy community group fixing things. You risk, frankly, bursting that bubble. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other objectors or submitters who would like to speak? Yep.
Hello, I'm Paula Edgar. I live at 50 Talbot Street. So I'm in a narrow building 3 doors up from the boundary of Merri-bek. I remain in objection against the wall height of 7 metres. It will overshadow a number of houses, and that has a negative impact on our well-being and our general day-to-day living with such an overshadowing, especially in the winter time. We've often sat out in the middle of the street as a group, you know, catching the last bit of the sun in the winter on a Sunday. We have a strong community presence in our both streets, Henkel and Talbot, and this, you know, height would really be quite imposing and unpleasant. Also, yes, the traffic with regards to what I have read, all general unloading was unloading and loading to be attended on Victoria Street. Yes, as Jack made the statement that that width in Talbot Street would be increased, and that indicates to me that that would be an increase in traffic flow in Talbot Street with unloading and loading rather than the Victorian entrance. The tree preservation in Henkel Street also, you know, there's two or three large trees there that we really wish to remain in place and not disappear. We're very strong-minded about that. We want those trees to remain. The dust extractor, the noise, it's stated that it should be, the dust extractor will be 3 metres from the source. There's a decibel, the noise level, if that dust extractor is contained within the building, if it can be at the furthest point away from any existing house.
If you could start to summarise.
They're really my major points. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other objectors or submitters?
Yep. Hello, Thomas Mitchell. I'm at 78 Henkel Street, which is directly behind Merri-bek. Also, a couple of my neighbours have asked me to kind of, you know, talk on their behalf. So there's a number of households here at the moment in front of you. I guess, firstly, I just want to express my disappointment that the decision-making appears to be based solely on economic development in the area. I think, as Jack identified, community actually is important to those of us that live there. You know, there's a business as opposed to at least 21 households that put in a complaint and however many individuals those households contain. I think more disappointing is in the recommendations, the identification that this can go on. It can be, you know, continue the way it is, and if there's a problem, contact the EPA. Many of us have contacted the EPA. That gets us nowhere, falls into that void of council, EPA, who's responsible, who's doing anything, which appears not to get very far, other than the fact that the EPA has apparently included some conditions that they think should be thought through if it was a use rights issue, which, given it's not, we aren't apparently willing to think about. Particular concern from my point of view is having a driveway directly opposite my bedroom window that enters into the back of a business. I think Henkel Street is very narrow, is parked out all of the time. If we're going to have cars entering and exiting from there, I am concerned about my neighbour's property, and what that actually will be used for. As has been identified, the conditions already on the structure aren't met with usually. So do we have any real faith that they will be into the future? I don't. I think also existing use rights from 1983, I don't know if you've noticed, it's 2018. There's a little bit of time has gone past. We are actually moving on. I think you can walk down the street and hear the gym noise when you walk past the gym. You can walk past the coffee roaster and smell the coffee roaster when you walk past it. You can hear the noise from Merri-bek from the entire neighbourhood all day. I think simply saying we're going to put up a concrete shell with a door that I'm concerned about opposite my bedroom window that funnels noise and whatever outside that door is not reasonable.
Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, sorry. One more thing. I just want to say that I think at the conversation we had here in October, all of the people present identified that we understand where we live. We know that we live on the edge of an industrial area. We also identified to Merri-bek that we don't mind that. But what we do expect is that council actually support us to integrate a bit better than it currently is. The Henkel Street setback starts that process, but I think it actually needs a more fulsome, thoughtful, empathetic, perhaps even if we are allowed to have an emotion about it, kind of engagement with the community that lives there. Thanks.
I'll just see if there's any other objectors first that'd like to speak, and then we can... Is anyone? Okay, then we can have the question from...
Oh, there is.
Oh, yep. Perfect, come up. Yeah, that's okay, he can come back up, yeah. If you just say your name and address.
Yeah, cool. So my name's Mike Edgar. I'm at 50 Talbot Street as well. And I suppose the uniqueness with our property is our property goes from Victoria Street to Henkel Street. So the first thing I'd like to say is that that 7 metre wall, by appearance and also by notification, doesn't appear to have changed. As Paula and a lot of our friends behind us have suggested, that's going to cause us some problems. And I think, like Thomas, the disappointment is that constructively a lot of people have spent a lot of time and effort coming to the council in October, and some of the councillors were here, like Mark Riley. It's a really good community, as Thomas has just said. We're not here to upset economic and social change. We're here to actually be by sort of working together to sort of come up with a common plan to move forward. And the disappointment thing for me is the fact that, in retrospect, everything that we did in October, and from the literature that we've received, not much has changed in terms of all the efforts that we've put in, considering all the time we have put in and the articulation of the way we've put these things in. So some of our colleagues behind us have been here for like 20, 30 years, so that's one thing. The second thing is, and this is like Thomas, for my neighbours at the back of the street. So as I said, I'm from Victoria Street to Henkel Street. So one of my colleagues has asked me, he can't be here tonight, but I'll just read out what he's asked me to do, with a view of giving all the councillors a copy of what he's asked me to read out. So this is on behalf of Christian. So Christian lives next door to Thomas, who's just spoken now, and and I'll just read his words. So, dear Chair and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to speak with regard to the proposal. I live opposite the subjected site on Henkel Street and am concerned about certain aspects of the proposed development and the potential negative impacts on the amenities and the properties in Henkel Street. My key concern is the potential for vehicles entering and exiting the site from Henkel Street and the negative amenity impact this additional traffic will have on residents, and any traffic associated with the site will impact on our enjoyment of the area. The existing crossing has not been used in years, and the use of the crossing for vehicles to enter and exit the site would constitute a change in the nature of the use, with resulting impacts on the surrounding areas, therefore contradicting the requirements of clause 63.05 exit use rights. There is already a permit in place, MPS 950542, that prohibits delivery of goods via the Henkel Street crossing. There is simply no need to retain and widen Henkel Street crossing given these limitations. I'm not against the issues of a notice of decision. However, I respectfully request that you consider some changes to the permit conditions to ensure that there will be no detrimental impact on the residents' property in Henkel Streets. The suggestions may include deleting condition 1C, inserting a new condition to 1C requiring deletion of the roller shutter door in the northern elevation, inserting a new condition 1D requiring the removal of the existing Henkel Street vehicle crossing and reinstatement of the curb and channel. And the last one, deleting condition 1G relating to the height of the roller shutter door, giving the new condition 1C, which would require its removal. Christian, thanks you for your consideration, and I thank you as well.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any other objectors or submitters who would like to speak? Yeah.
So Justin Winter, 52 Talbot Street, Brunswick. Just like to briefly reiterate what the others have said. 7 metre high facade on Talbot Street is imposing. The external parapet of the wall is actually 800 mil above the gutter and the roofing. So the peak of the roof, as I understand, is only 6'6". So it doesn't seem to be a reason why that external wall needs to be its height. Also on Henkel Street, I really support the setback that's been proposed. I just don't understand why it only has to go 5 metres. If they could continue that through, it'd really help. And basically the only other thing that hasn't been raised is 54 Talbot Street, which is next door, which has an opening in its wall, which is going to be cast over basically by the external wall. So something that hasn't seemed to have been addressed, but there'll be no natural light into that property whatsoever. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other objectors? Yes. Yep.
Andrew Clarahan, 54 Talbot Street. I'm on the east side. The 7 metre wall. Just briefly go back. When I got a permit, or attempted to get a permit to do the development, I employed a celebrated mid-century architect. We weren't allowed to do a flat roof. We were railroaded into this 7 metre lean-to thing. And now I knew it would be a portent anyway. And I'm getting a, as Justin mentioned, that slot that I had created for a shard of more light, that's just getting covered up. And you know, on the other hand, I'll change subject now. Parking, I believe that there should be a redesign of the front of their building, like everyone else, a proper apron for heaps of cars or adequate amount of cars. Another 7 would be great. All the other businesses have it, and yeah, I just think that, you know, that redesign should be pushed, you know, that setback at the front of Victoria Street, so they've got the a bit more flexibility with major deliveries. I realise that there's a lot of liability involved in backing trucks and whatnot in Victoria Street. The local window manufacturing place just before the end of Victoria Street, there was an accident with one of their trucks and a woman's car was written off. So they're stymied, they're moving. You know, they can't start their machines on Sunday, so they're going. Fanati, that's the word that I heard today. So I think we're changing land use, so we've got to really scrutinise some of these commercial improvements, if you like. You know, business is improving, and you know, we've got dozens of people around this business. You know, we want to see things improve. We've been subjected to, you know, all sorts of things, from dust and noise and traffic problems and parking and whatnot. Anyway,
if you could summarise that, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Come forward.
I'm Dave Bell from number 76. I'd like you to analyse Christian's letter. I think that
was that 76 Henkel Street?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
So I'm almost directly opposite the back of this proposed extension. This business has had an operating permit that goes back to 1983, when asbestos, for instance, was a legal product in Australia. Grandfathering the conditions, the continued use, is not appropriate in an immediately abutting residential Zone 1 area. It's had a massive detrimental effect on my health and wellbeing and my neighbours. This morning I was woken up at 6:55, sometimes at 6:30, sometimes they can operate their machine at 7 o'clock. A nightclub would be measured for noise outside the nightclub, not inside the nightclub. So it's very inappropriate for a measure, or the bar to be set at 80 decibels, 3 metres from a machine. We don't live inside the factory. We live on Henkel Street, we live on Talbot Street. So I'd expect that condition to be amended to be a proper measure from outside the factory, so that you're actually understanding how it affects amenity in the local area. I don't suppose many of you have actually had the chance to get down there and listen to the factory. I know I've had the EPA out the front of my property measure the sound using microphones, and they turn the machine off when they saw their branded vehicle turn up. I'd encourage you to make this your business. You need to know about this. I'd be very happy to play a video for you later. I've got a nice recording here. You can see what sound it makes. They operate 6 days a week. Roofing over a significant extension, I believe, constitutes a significant change in use, and therefore they should be required to be fully compliant with modern standards with regards to environmental controls, whether that be paint fumes, noise, or any of the other issues that we've reported endlessly. I presently have a number of customer service requests, which for mine are outstanding because I've never heard from a council officer in response to any of the complaints.
If you could just state to the item at hand, thank you.
Once again, I'd just reiterate that I would like to put my name behind Christian's letter. I would like you to consider this as a significant change and consider your obligations under the Health and Wellbeing Act when you consider this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other objectors or submitters who would like to speak? Okay, we might, if the applicant or representative of the applicant would like to speak, we'll let them speak first and then councillors can ask any questions they might have. Yeah. Is there, yeah? If you could state your name as well, thank you.
Graham Bird, the owner of Merri-bek Pickets. I want to clarify one thing. 83 we started with a permit, which is 35 years. We've been doing the same thing for 35 years. I think we're a bit of a, well, we're certainly well known in the Brunswick area and in the whole of Melbourne. We're referred to by the National Trust and just about every other department. So we are, I think, an important part of Brunswick. We employ 12 people, 3 are locals, which the council themselves encourage employment, so in the Brunswick area. So I'm not sure why we want to be subject to being pushed out of Brunswick in the respect that most of the people that are complaining probably leave Brunswick for the day and come back during the day.
Would you mind just staying to the item at hand, thanks? Just talk to your own application.
Yeah, not real good at public speaking.
That's okay.
Even though I'm only addressing it to yourself. So my application for the building in particular is to keep our timber product out of the weather and furthermore keep our noise level down. And talking of noise, 80 decibels at 3 metres is the same as your domestic vacuum cleaner at 3 metres. Noise, as just pointed out with the EPA, we're 8 decibels over what's permissible for us to operate at. 8 decibels whispering. But we want to fix that anyway because we obviously need to be responsible to our neighbours, the residents of Talbot Street and Henkel Street. The building will also improve the appearance of Henkel Street, I believe. We've got an old tin fence that's falling down that rattles in the wind. I am concerned about the impact of the local residents for the reasons I mentioned above. We don't, although we do work 6 days a week, I would beg that the residents on a Saturday would never hear us before 9 o'clock in the morning, so we're respectful for the residents. And most Saturdays, they wouldn't hear us at all. And particularly in the last 6 or 8 months, they would not have heard us operating any machinery because we choose not to use any loud equipment if we can help it.
If you could just begin to summarise.
Pardon?
If you could just summarise, yeah.
Well, yeah, okay. In the height of the building is, well, how can I summarise? I really had
your time's almost up, so if you can,
okay.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
In summary, the height of our wall is the same as the new build next door to us, 7 metres. So if we cause shadowing, so must he. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you so much.
I can't see any reason why we can't build our factory.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so if there are any questions from councillors, I know Councillor Bolton had a question for you, Mike.
Should I stand back up there then?
My question
It's
was
for,
for one
hers
of the
was for
residents.
the,
Okay.
Councillor Bolton's was for one of the residents, so,
It was, I think it was Thomas, if I remember the name rightly. I was just wondering, are the main issues noise or other emissions as well in terms of fumes? And secondly, when are is the noise pretty consistent regardless of the day of the week and the hour of the day, or is it sort of really just certain days is it just weekdays that's a problem, or is it Saturdays as well?
Sorry, Thomas, could I just ask that you respond
Sorry.
to the lectern? Thank you.
I was just trying to get a bit of a picture of the noise.
Yeah, sure. I suppose for me, probably the question could be better addressed by others who are at home more than I am. But it is 6 days a week. It generally starts quite early in the morning, perhaps not so early on a Saturday. But recently, and I recently started studying, so I'm up at the crack of dawn, sitting in my front room studying, and the forklift, for example, is often operating at 6:30 in the morning. So, the noise is consistent. It comes and goes. The forklift might die off in the morning and not be heard much in the rest of the afternoon, but the I think it's an air compressor, is heard on and off all day until around 4 o'clock. So it's fairly consistent, I would say. If that can be effectively contained, then that'd be great. But if I can't hear the vacuum cleaner, then that'd be nice. But currently there's quite a lot of noise that comes right through my house. I think the other thing to consider is also...
Sorry, we've just got a few other questions as well. So.
The noise bounces around. So there's lots of hard surfaces. So it bounces around the back of my house and the front of my house and the side. It's not simply I'm right there, it's coming in.
Great. Councillor Kavanagh?
A question for the applicant, please. Many of the residents were saying that the condition is you're supposed to be using Victoria Street for loading and unloading, and that you're doing a lot of unloading and unloading from the other streets that are supposed to be protected. Your response to that, sir?
We don't even park in Henkel Street. None of my staff use Henkel Street. I haven't used the back gate in Henkel Street for years. My only reason for keeping Henkel Street is I think that I have a right to have access to a street that I have a frontage to. In concerns of unloading and loading primarily unloading in Talbot Street, we only bring the larger vehicles into Talbot Street because, as suggested before, Victoria Street, we are right opposite Gardner Street. Bringing a large vehicle into Gardner Street is just a disaster.
Can I ask how often that would happen? How often would you have a delivery from a large vehicle?
A large truck, maximum once a week. I would guess once a fortnight on average. Although we might have 3 deliveries in 1 week, but won't have another delivery for 6.
And one more for me. The PID I noticed was in October last year, and then it took quite a while for you to submit amended plans, I believe, and they didn't seem to change much.
Can you say that again, please?
So you had your planning consultation meeting in October last year, right? I believe that following that you submitted some amended plans, is that right? That you amended the application a little bit, changed it a little bit?
Only ever so slightly.
That's right. So my question is, why was it only changed slightly? You didn't think that the objectors' concerns were valid, or you made some changes but very minor changes?
I hear the objectors.
Yes.
Hear the objectors loud and clearly. Our 7-metre wall is on Talbot Street's no higher than our neighbour's wall, so our wall, other than the part on the very end of Talbot Street, would only be another 4 metres to our new neighbour's build.
Right.
And on the back street, it then aligns with all the other factories. So to my eye, it just is a nice clean line that continues. And furthermore, there's a house that in Henkel Street, which is only 20 metres at a guess, might be 25, which has the same impact and the same height wall, which is a residential house.
Yes, it is.
In Henkel Street that our wall would have. So I think it'd just be still a nice continual line. And if other people develop in Hinkle Street, they will probably build further out.
Okay. And just one more from me. The back door is apparently in the original permit. It is supposed to be closed, is that right? And it has been open continually, is that correct?
It is open when practical or closed when practical. The door makes so much noise. It's a roller shutter door, and you can imagine the noise it makes coming up and down. We access the backyard during the week, probably 3 times an hour, 4 times an hour to get the stock from out the back. So to bring it up and down, if the bipping of the forklift is annoying, then the roller door going up and down would be a nightmare to the residents.
I accept that, but can I ask you what your planning permit says? Does it say that it should be closed?
When practical.
Right, okay, thank you. No, that's fair enough, thank you. All right, okay.
Okay, Councillor Abood.
Yeah, I'm just interested to know if you've been issued any planning infringement notices with regard to the current permit that you're operating under.
Okay, Councillor Mark-Riley.
Thank you. Just a query about the parking arrangements. I'm wondering how many staff use active transport during the week in terms of the parking issues that we're looking at. So I'm just wondering how many of them rely on non-vehicle transport, so they're walking, riding, catching public transport, etc., because they're not far from the station. Are there any staff that use those modes? You said 3 were local.
Yeah, 2.5 ride push bikes. Now, at the time, I don't actually know who gets there. The bulk of our clients, the bulk of our staff have company cars, so they turn up to work and then disappear in the car.
Okay. Councillor Farnley.
Thank you. Was Graham, was it?
Yes.
Graham, in terms of the equipment within the factory, I think, some people were talking about the forklift. There was discussion around the air compressor. Is it fair to say the air compressor is the loudest piece of equipment you would think within that factory?
No.
What do you think it would be?
The whining, and whining because it's whines. Well, it's the moulder that we use to square dress timber is the loudest machine that we would have. The machine that we have the most impact on, which takes a large area, is the machine that collects our sawdust. And Blind Freddie can see where our industry is going. If we don't contain the noise and anything else that leaves our property, we're going to get thrown out of Brunswick and move to wherever.
So just on that, is there any initiatives that you're putting in to start reducing the impact of the noise, such as the sawdust collector?
That's the sawdust collector is what we were talking about, 80 decibels at 3 metres. So when it was brought to the attention before, it's 3 metres, 80 decibels, which is the same. So the new dust collector, so we take the one off the roof that echoes right round Brunswick, that the EPA have pinned us on, which is only 8 decibels over our legal limit.
Yes.
That gets taken off the roof and decommissioned, and we put a new system inside the factory, which obviously we need more room inside the factory to put it, but it only makes 80 decibels at 3 metres in distance. So it's the same as your vacuum cleaner.
Thanks, Ray.
It's a lot bigger than your vacuum cleaner, but it has mufflers on it, etc.
Thank you.
Councillor Dorney.
Hi, thanks, Graham. I just would like to know about other environmental hazards that are being produced as a result of your business operations. You have mentioned noise, and residents have alluded to amenity issues as well. I'm just wanting to know about dust and fumes and how you've responded to complaints and interactions with the EPA and local council on those matters.
The dust has always been a major issue, particularly for our closest neighbours, our closest 2 neighbours. The system that we currently use to collect our dust, I'm not sure whether I should be addressing everyone or just itself. The system that we collect our dust in now is a relatively old machine. somehow, but I still work. It works, but it often clogs up, which then it's on the roof, so it blows sawdust absolutely everywhere, and most of it goes into Talbot Street, of which is very undesirable, obviously, causes grief to our neighbours. Hence, by decommissioning that old system and putting a new system in, it's contained inside the factory, and it actually has filters on it opposed to a cyclone. And a cyclone spins the air around, drops the heavy particles out. If it, for some reason, clogs, it doesn't throw anything in the hopper, it throws it all out over our neighbours. It doesn't happen often.
And fumes?
No, it's not fumes. The fumes that we have is the smell of organic paints, not organic paints, of paints when we're painting.
Okay, are there any other questions from councillors? No? Okay, if there are no further questions, could I please have a motion? Yep. Councillor Riley.
Thanks, Graham. We'll get on with the next part of the meeting, which is I'd like to put a alternative motion to the Urban Planning Committee tonight, and I'll just read those out. I'm not really showing up, but they, in essence, contain the alternatives that were in the agenda, but I might just quickly read them and for the sake of the audience. So the first thing is that the construction of the building that works for the extension to the existing warehouse and a reduction in the standard car parking requirement. So one new condition is to amend condition 1H, that a mural is to be shown painted or produced on Talbot Street loading access door, similar in size to the area of the door, is to be commissioned by a local artist. The mural is to be developed in consultation with residents of 40 to 54 and 57 to 59 Talbot Street. A new condition, 3D, tall and narrow spreading vegetation, for example, ornamental pears or pencil pines within the front setback of 54 and 59 Talbot Street to soften the mass of the 7-metre wall on the boundary, provided that the owners of each of these properties agree, or an extension of the mural across the eastern facade of the approved building where it abuts the front yard of 54 and 59 Talbot Street. New condition 15, the modified Talbot Street entrance must only be used for access to on-site car parking and for outward delivery of stock. Delivery of stock to the site via Talbot Street to be no more than once per week. And then to renumber condition 15 to condition 16. And then the rest of the proposal is as presented.
Is there a seconder for Councillor Riley? Yeah, Councillor Farnley.
Thank you. I think we've heard many of the issues that have been happening, and I've been listening and talking to the residents and many of the objectors for some time, so I appreciate the effort that's gone into this, and I'm hoping that some of the conditions that we're putting to tonight's proposal for this development are acceptable, and that they will be something that the owner can live with as well, in terms of the restrictions around Talbot Street, which is, given your statements going around of being one delivery a week or on average, I'm hoping that's something that you will be able to live with. The parking in that street is a big issue in terms, and that's why hence my question around active transport and people not always relying on their cars. But I understand the changes you're making internally are to allow more to arrange a car parking so that people can actually park in off the street more often. And the automatic doors on Hinkle Street and Talbot Street will allow workers to come and enter to and from those streets in a fairly easy manner and to contain the noise and so on. The dust extractor, I think, is something that everyone's really looking forward to having implemented, and to have it enclosed and no louder than a vacuum cleaner is something that many residents are looking forward to. So I'm hoping, and I appreciate the offer around the mural, and I'm hoping that somehow that sort of the mass of that wall, the 7 metres of the wall, you might be able to work with residents to come up with some solutions around some greening of it and or extending the mural in some way to keep the amenity and the work that the investment that the community have made into improving that street. So we've also done, the officers have done quite a bit of work on maintaining and keeping the trees and retaining what trees we have on Hinkle and Talbot Street, or particularly Hinkle Street. I think that's probably the main things I would like to sort of cover at this point, and I'll leave the rest to the debate. Thank you.
Councillor Farnley.
Thank you. Thank you to all the residents that came in tonight to present your views. I thought you articulated your concerns around shadowing and noise very well, so thank you. And also to Graham, it's never easy to get a bit of a grilling from councillors, but so thank you for articulating that. We do want you to keep employing local residents. It's never easy to make a decision like this because it is inevitably unpopular, but we have a business here that's seeking to expand their warehouse at the back to protect some of the products that they produce at the front, back, I'm not sure, whichever way you look at it, depending where you are. But I'm supportive of Councillor Riley's motion because it puts even more stringent restrictions in place, and what that actually means is, that 5 metre setback on Talbot Street, and in addition to that, putting a restriction on the car access to once per week via Talbot Street entrance. There's a number of stringent conditions to help protect that. I'm happy to hear that there's going to be some investment to upgrade some of the noisy equipment, especially around the sawdust collection, which is going to be removed from the top of the building into the building. I think that's a good progressive step. So what we need to do is just find a way where we can work with this organisation to start helping resolve some of those concerns from residents. And rather than knocking this back, this organisation going to VCAT and getting the full warehouse all the way to the end of the street and a whole range of other lack of restrictions, it's better to pass a motion here tonight, a permit here tonight, with some more stringent restrictions to hopefully go a bit of a way to help the residents and some of their concerns. I'm sure we'll continue to work with the residents and their concerns over the coming few months as this happens, and make sure that the organisation is adhering to their permit with the help of EPA. I understand that there's been some concerns about working outside of that in the past. What we're looking at tonight is purely the planning application, and then enforcement issues. We can certainly follow that up with the organisations that can enforce those as well.
Thank you. Councillors, is there anyone who would like to speak against the motion? Okay.
Thank you. Now, planning is always difficult, and it's always difficult to find a balance, particularly in an area where there is an interface between residential and industrial. But I'm personally not comfortable with approving an extension for a business that is effectively not complying with its existing permit and has shown a history of non-compliance. So that's my view, and I do feel that residents quite often are told that they can't expect the same level of amenity if they're in a complete residential zone. Well, I think the same is true on the other side as well, that businesses that operate in an interface with residential must be really cautious, must do everything possible to comply with all of their permits, standards, and I don't think that this has happened in the past, and I don't have confidence that it would happen in the future, so therefore I'm not willing to support an extension.
Okay, Councillor Bolton. I'm also going to speak against the extension. I feel that I definitely do support local jobs, and I certainly don't want to see all blue-collar jobs eradicated, because not everyone is a white-collar worker, so I do support that. But I also am very aware that an extension of the business or extension of the warehouse in the situation where there has been a lack of compliance with the planning permit, I think that I think that's probably one of the reasons why residents are so upset. I feel that there isn't enough protection, even with this alternative resolution that's been moved by Councillor Riley. I feel that there isn't enough protection for residents. I think the noise is the main thing, and the dust extractor is being removed from the roof to the inside the factory, which I think is a good move. I don't know if there are other noise attenuation measures being added to the machine, but I think the applicant mentioned that the moulding machine was the most noisy of the machines, and I'm not sure if there are going to be increased noise attenuation measures with the moulding machine. And I guess with the expansion of space, is there going to be any increase of production, like new machines and so forth entered, being added into the building? I mean, I sort of feel that at the moment it's not really feasible to really grow a lot further without really impacting on the residents who also live there as well. I'm also concerned about the loss of light from some of the neighbours as well. So it's not just the noise, but I think I sort of feel as if it may be true that there are other buildings with walls of a similar height, but I also, some of the smaller houses in the street that are very close by, I think are indicating, or the people living in those houses are indicating that this the height will have an impact on them in terms of loss of light and overshadowing. And I think we can't really underestimate the impacts of that. I sort of feel as if, there need to be modifications to this proposal in order for an extension to be granted. And I'm not necessarily opposed,
Councillor Boswell, if you can wind
to an
up, please.
extension, but I sort of feel as if there needs to be more demonstrated protection for residents before it can be approved.
Thank you. Councillor Wood.
Thank you. So I'm a little bit confused because I asked the question about the planning infringement notice, and Graham, I heard you say that you haven't been issued any, but that you were issued one from the EPA, and I've heard other people here talk about non-compliance, and I've heard the residents talk about non-compliance. But I will support Councillor Riley's motion because I'm a business operator in Moreland as well, and our business is 12 years old, and we will be squeezed out in the next maybe 5 years if we can stretch it that far by. Basically, our restaurant will be turned into apartments. And I can see quite clearly that it would be very easy for the whole city to be rezoned residential and everything to turn into an apartment. And then we're going to be dealing with crowded trams and, a lack of open space and all of this stuff that we grapple with. That's quite a long rabbit hole once you start talking about the implications of turning everything into residential. So I feel like, once again, what we're doing here is as Urban Planning Committee members, we're dealing with the rub, which is where the residents who've been there for a long time are rubbing up against the business, which has also been there for a long time, and this is where we need to manage the situation. I feel like extending the warehouse and bringing most of your stuff inside, essentially, is going to have a positive impact on the people who live in the area. I think that with regard to noise and dust and everything else, but I think there's something really valuable to learn from this application coming through, is that at the back of the business is a very tight community, and a community who want to hang out together, they want to be outside, and there's a couple of little details in here that are where you can create a bit of magic as a business owner, and I hope that this is coming through. So there's something that stood out to me is that there are 2 trees at the back gate on Henkel Street. We've conditioned that the tree on the east side needs to be retained, and that the tree on the west side, if it's possible, should be retained. But we haven't conditioned that it will be. And I think that that's one of the things that you can try and endeavour to have done, that little things like saving that tree is going to make a big difference to the street at the back. I think that things like your noisy gate needs to be changed into a not noisy gate, so it can go up and down. You've got to try and get as much, your business is what some people call an old trade, so that's worth protecting, right? And the front of that business looks great. It looks like a house with a picket fence to some extent, or a business that builds them. And I think you need to consider the aesthetics of the back of the business as well. So I think that if the front looks like the front of somebody's house, the back should look like a garden. And so I think that considering what you've heard from your neighbours and some of the stuff that's in here, potentially this can be a better outcome. And I think also, regardless of whatever happened with the pins that weren't or weren't issued, if you don't stick within your permit, you will be issued pins, because these people will not be happy with the way the business is operating. So,
Councillor Kavanagh.
Yes, just very briefly. First of all, can I thank Councillor Riley for attending the PID and for working with residents throughout the process. It's very good. Yes, I will be supporting the motion. I think I actually think the residents have put very good cases, but I do think that the applicant answered the questions pretty well and pretty truthfully from what I could see. So in essence, I think on balance, I'll be supporting it. I do think it's important though, and I reiterate the words of Councillor Abood. You can see tonight that we have very articulate, engaged residents. Many of them involved in the friends of the different streets of the area. They are people who are involved and they do want to be involved in their neighbourhood. And it is important that you do become a better neighbour with them. Now, obviously, the extractor, etc., will help with the lessening of the noise and all those sorts of things. But small practices and changes to the practice will help a lot. And I believe that the residents will come on board with you and give you a fair go as long as you also reciprocate in that regard. I thank the residents who are involved in the Friends of the at Talbot Street and Henkel Street and their work in beautifying the area and what council can do to support that. I'm more than happy to be involved in that as well. So I'll be supporting the application.
Are there any other councillors who would like to speak? Yeah, Councillor Dorney.
I'd also like to, I stand to support Councillor Riley's new conditions and the planning application. I mean, there have been a lot of objections and I feel satisfied that they've been met to an acceptable level in terms of both how Graham, the applicant, has responded, but as well as what's written in the report and the research that was done. It's a sensitive interface, industrial and residential, and there's no one answer or one solution. I think moving forward, you are being watched and monitored quite closely in terms of how you are managing environmental risk to the residents and affecting amenity. And I think that, that in itself is not an easy process. It is quite messy and we need to really streamline that moving forward between, being really clear on what council's responsibility is and what state government's responsibility is and how we work together to get the best outcomes for the community. I feel, simple things as Councillor Abood said around trees remaining. I think there's no real reason why that second tree needs to go, so I'd really love to see that tree remain, collaborating with the community on what sort of mural is seen, looking at how you can have some really nice green wall or interface on that setback as well. So, it's a hard call standing up here and hearing both sides, but I'll be supportive of Councillor Riley's motion.
Are there any other councillors who'd like to speak? I might just say a few words. I'm also going to be supportive of Councillor Riley's motion. I thank all the objectors for coming here this evening and also to the applicant. I grew up on Holloway Road and am quite fond of the interface, I suppose, with the industrial part of Brunswick along with the residential. I do recognise that it is a sensitive interface, but I feel quite satisfied that some of the challenges that this business is having is around old equipment for an old trade, and with this new investment into the space, I hope to see that it actually improves the amenity for residents and improves the business. And I hope that with the amendments that we've put in, we can actually see the colours and the life in the trees in that neighbourhood continue to flourish, and we can continue to try and improve the amenities for those streets. So thank you for coming this evening, and I'll now put that... Oh, yeah, you can speak.
Sorry, just briefly. Thank you,
sure.
Madam Chair. So I just want to thank everyone for all of their work and effort in this. It is a difficult issue trying to come to some compromise, but there's been a lot of work done on both parties, and I appreciate the debate that's happened this evening as well. In closing, I just want to sort of reiterate the fact that this is a commercial and residential interface. You've heard that many times tonight, and unfortunately the 7-metre wall is not something I felt we could actually address with this major extension and get the other benefits that that's going to bring by encasing and bringing everything inside the building. So there's a bit of give and take that had to happen there, and it's unfortunate we couldn't address the height issues, but I'm hoping that the greening and some of the other aspects might actually ameliorate that to some extent. The issues around compliance and breaches is something that I've heard very long and loudly and clearly, and it's not something that we can necessarily address in this planning application. However, I believe some of them will be addressed by the fact that the new equipment and the improvements will actually mean that you'll be able to not have to put up with that noise and all of the air. And I've got some people shaking their heads at me, but that's my interpretation. I'm telling you now that I'm actually saying that I'm hoping that in a few months and years' time, you might actually be able, as neighbours, commercial and residential, actually be celebrating the improvements you've got there. And in fact, if you do it, I'll bring the case of champagne. So I'm serious, because I actually think this is a really tough one, and I think the goodwill that it's extended from the neighbours that I've spoken to has been huge. You've put up with a lot over a long period, and I'm really hoping this might actually draw a line under that, and we can actually all move on and actually have a better way of living and working together. That's our intention tonight. So I'm hoping we can get a reasonable outcome this evening. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll now put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. Okay, so the next report this evening is, oh yeah, and now, yeah, that's right, it's not in here. I'll now move to the officer to
Thank you, councillors.
the next steps.
The Urban Planning Committee have determined to issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit for the extension to the existing warehouse and a reduction of the standard car parking at 389 to 395 Victoria Street, subject to the alternative recommendation that was put forward by Councillor O'Reilly. All residents will receive a copy of the notice of decision. You'll have 21 days in which to lodge an appeal through VCAT if you wish. Similarly, the permit applicant has 60 days in which to lodge an appeal to VCAT should they oppose any conditions contained herein.
Thank you. Okay, so the next report this evening is 16 Irvine Crescent, Brunswick West, planning application MPS 2016-923. I will move to the officer to present the report. If we've got technical difficulty.
Great, thank you, councillors. My name is Mark Hughes and I'll be presenting the application at 16 Irvine Crescent in Brunswick West. Planning permission here is sought to construct 8 dwellings, 6 of which will be triple storey and 2 will be double storey. There's also a reduction of 2 visitor car parking spaces sought. The land, as you can see on the screen, is zoned residential growth. It's within a design and development overlay, schedule number 24. The land's also within a parking overlay and also within a development contributions plan overlay. The proposal, as presented from Irvine Crescent, is presented up on the screen. That shows the ground floor. The apartments are divided into 4 which have ground level open space and another 4 which rely on open space through a balcony. To the rear of Irvine Crescent, there's a car stacker that contains 8 car spaces, plus the front dwelling has 2 car parking spaces. The first floor, which shows balconies for the dwellings facing Irvine Crescent or to the rear, and you can see the bedrooms for the middle dwellings there. And that plan shows the extent of the second floor. That's the proposal as viewed from the west elevation. That'd be the east, and that's the rear. Public notice was undertaken. Since the release of the report, we've received further submissions to the proposal, and now there's currently 17 objections to the proposal. Broadly, the objectors are concerned about on-site car parking provision, traffic impacts, the use of the laneway, the use of the car stacker, overdevelopment, and neighbourhood character. The recommendation begins on page 31 of tonight's agenda. The recommendation is to issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit, which notably includes conditions that seek to improve the design detail, and the revised plans are shown up on the screen, along with conditions to address overlooking amongst other things. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any objectors or submitters who would like to speak? Please come forward to the lectern and state your name and address.
Thank you. I'm David Marshall. I live in 11A Appleby Crescent, which is 2 streets down from this development. the way that these developments like this affect me is the vehicles and the car parking. My objection opposed the concession of 2 spaces because the residents of this area, part of this community, are telling you that car parking exemptions in this street are not justified. They cannot be justified. I prepared a statement to this effect with some studies of the street and petitioning or surveying of the neighbourhood. I sent this through. Was this considered? Do you know?
Please.
Chair,
Sorry, what was that?
I didn't receive it. I sent this to the planning department during the planning assessment period. I didn't receive any confirmation that it had been read or responded to.
Are we able to confirm?
Basically, the substance of it is that this street has reached a threshold where any further car parking in the street will just make it untenable completely. That 50% of the car parking spaces of this street are already occupied, and that any further will just make this street impossible. And that the residents here of this particular area are telling you that we don't want exemptions granted, but you keep doing it. So that's the first point. The second point is that car stackers are not viable solutions to this problem. Fine for the other end. When you go to your business or go to work or wherever you're going to leave your car, you have the early bird parking, you leave your car, you forget about it, you come back and pick it up. It's at that end, it's maintained by the staff of the people who run it. In this particular instance, it's a residence. You put your car in the stacker. Residents need access to their cars all the time, to load it, to retrieve things that are forgotten, to prepare, to make several trips during the day. How are you going to do this with a car stacker? What happens when it breaks down? You're going to work, you're trying to get your kids off to school, you turn up, you can't get your car.
If you could just summarise, thank you.
Who maintains it? The body corporate. It's untenable. So this solution doesn't work. We're proposing that it doesn't get, we would strongly ask that it doesn't get accepted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other objectors or submitters? Please come forward.
Good evening. My name's Tony Adamson. My family and I live opposite the development at 11 Irvine Crescent. We are here once again bringing up the same old arguments. Once again, our issue is with congestion in the street. We are now finding it is almost impossible to get out of our drive. In fact, last week my family had to go out and push a car out of the way. The traffic now is just horrendous. You don't see it during the day, but coming on the Sunday night when everyone is parking outside the front because they're not parking in their garages, you go and have a look at the garages in the lane, they're filled with goods. People don't have enough room in their houses, so they're filling the garages up and they're parking in the street. The street is a narrow street. Once the parking is filled up, it's a one-lane street. If you have a car parked on our left of our drive and the right of our drive and across the road, we cannot turn out of our driveway. We now have to go and knock on doors and ask people to move. I think that is really unacceptable, and we've been talking about this for 2 years. Now, we note that the developer has asked for an exemption. We believe that in the past exemptions have been given for visitor car park, but this will be the first time one has been asked for I'm not quite sure the terminology you use, but for the houses. We also point out that they're going to be putting a driveway in, so we lose another parking spot out in the street. So in point of fact, there's actually 3 parking spots or 3 places now that they're actually getting. Our other concern is we think that this is too big a development for the block. We had this problem with, what was the number of it? 14 Irvine Crescent. We did take that to council and appealed, and they did support us in this one, saying that the development was too large. There is plenty of land here for an appropriate number of houses, plus also parking off street. We hear lots of stories about they'll put in bike paths, bike area, storage areas. That sounds really nice, but that's not the reality. Come to the street and have a look. We bought in there 10 years ago. It is now really busy. My other concern is the council has done a lot of work on heat island effect. I noticed from the report that the council did a few years ago that you actually have said that this is one of the worst areas for heat island effect, but we continue to see all those houses on the north side of the street be knocked down and get just put up with more concrete. There's very little greenery there. We worry about the quality of the houses. I challenge you all to go down and have a look at I think it's number 16 with its falling down fence after 4 years and knee-high grass and rubbish bins all over the place. They are not helping the neighbourhood character. We're seeing the street be run down by cheap rental properties. It's embarrassing to live there. There is rubbish on the nature strips now because renters go in and out and they leave all their rubbish there. I have seen a deterioration in the quality of the street that I live in, and it really is upsetting. We bought to live there, not as an investment, and we don't see that's being supported. We are not against development. These are big blocks and we understand it, and we think there's been some really appropriate developments in the street and we have not objected to all of them, but we do think this one is way too big and we would like to see the parking amendments be knocked back, and also we would also like you to look at the size of these apartments. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any objectors or submitters who'd like to speak? Come forward. Lectern.
Good evening, councillors. Mark Higginbotham from Hope Street in West Brunswick. I'm here because it's one of my great topics. It's car stackers. Now, I'm rather interested and surprised about this report. First of all, under 1P, it says specifications for the car stacker system, including specific model numbers and upper and ground floor vehicle clearance heights, are to be provided. The plans are to dimension the car stackers in accordance with these specs, at least 25% and so forth. The report gives us no indication at all about the type of car stacker, what its model number is, who it's made by, or anything else. In fact, you put it in as a condition, and I'm surprised that that wasn't provided at the time that this report was done. I go to page 53. That's the actual plan here. I'm looking at the car stacker itself. There's no indication that I can see, and perhaps I'm wrong. I don't know whether there's any gates on it or anything else to reduce the noise. There's no reference to it at all. There's reference in the report to an acoustic report. There's no acoustic report attached to this particular document. So it's very difficult to know exactly what you're trying to comply with. I then go to the conditions and I go to the acoustic attenuation. And thank you, you've certainly done some work on this. I don't know on what basis, because it's not here, but I go into tenure prior to the commencement, the development allowed by this permit, the acoustic report prepared by the acoustics, so Cogent Acoustics, dated 16th of 2017, must be endorsed to form part of the permit. And then you go on to say, the development must be constructed and maintained in accordance with the requirements of the recommendations of the approved acoustic assessment. That's fine, and that should be there. But it raises once again the question, and one of the other people who made the point, we're talking about this is going to be maintained by an owners corporation, the residents. At point 12, you go on to say that upon request, an acoustic review will be undertaken at the landowner's cost to verify ongoing compliance with condition 10. We get back to the same issue. These things need to be regularly maintained according to the recommendation of the manufacturer, but we don't know who the manufacturer is. It's got to be done by appropriate people. And none of this is, you've made mention of it here, but there's nothing in the report from the applicant to do with any of these issues.
If you could now wind up, Mark.
Sure.
Thank you.
This really is a further example of the matters I raised at VCAT and elsewhere. This is precisely the problem with car stackers. And I said this would happen again in West Brunswick, in other of these places, when the residential growth zones, and here it is. I said, line them up, because this is what's coming. But there has to be, you as councillors have got to make sure that if you're going to approve this, that they're going to be used properly and maintained properly. It's up to you.
Thank you. Are there any other objectors or submitters that would like to speak? Is there an applicant or someone who would like to speak on behalf of the applicant? Please come forward.
I'm Daniel from Arksine, applicant. Good evening, councillors and attendees. I guess we can talk about the strategic location of this development in the neighbourhood centre and access to transport and so on, but sometimes that gets a little bit lost in the nuts and bolts of the development. So I'll probably just head back a little bit. Our firm didn't actually start this application, started with another firm and was actually a bit stalled at council for quite a while because it wasn't an appropriate response to the site. And we took over after, I think, possibly a year of that being at council and redesigned this whole proposal. So I suppose, realistically, this is probably a little bit unusual looking for the area. It is in a growth zone, which typically sees big banks of triple-storey dwellings, all relying on balconies. This actually proposes 4 dwellings that have courtyards, 25 to 30 square metre courtyards, not something typically seen in the growth zone. So this has a lot more landscaping and a lot more diversity than a lot of general dwellings seen, such as the one next door that's been recently approved. So this has been achieved through the use of car stackers. It's been quite integral to allowing a different sort of proposal that has some only double-storey, very traditional living ones for 4 of them, a lot less concrete relied upon because of the lack of a long driveway that pretty much every other unit in this area relies on for access. So we've tried to propose something a little different, and this is the necessity of a car stacker system for some of those dwellings. I understand it's not typically seen. It is becoming more typically seen as a solution to reducing the amount of driveway needed in places and increasing the amount of cars available. In terms of the reduction of car parking, because clearly car parking traffic is the big issue, using the stacker system allows, or has allowed access from the laneway to try and keep some cars off Irvine Crescent itself. It also services 8 cars, and what that means is, although there's a reduction of 2 resident spaces sought, they are 3-bed dwellings. They still have 1 car space. There are no dwellings that don't have any car spaces provided. There's just a reduction for 2 of them to not have the 2 car parks required. So essentially we've worked quite long and hard with the council planning department, and also of late the urban designer, who's taken an interest in this proposal, and there's been some detailed back and forth to actually improve it from an urban design standpoint, to improve some of that presentation to the street and to neighbours. So I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, Councillor Bolton. Sorry, that was a question for the applicant.
I've got a question, sorry. I was wondering what size cars do and don't fit into the car stacker. I've seen other applicants come here and say basically only 85% of cars fit into their particular car stackers. So what would be the percentage and that would fit into your car stacker, and what would be some of the vehicles that would just fit in or not fit in?
Sure, I'm not au fait 100% with all the sort of the models, but the requirement in the planning scheme, which is also a condition, is that a quarter of the spaces cater to a 1.8 metre tall, which is, I think, your general SUV size. So that's what this is. This will have to comply with, is to allow for those slightly taller cars for 25% of the total. Yeah. As far as makes and models, I'm not sure what exactly. Yeah.
Are there any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for any of the objectors, councillors? No?
I've just got one question.
Sure.
Tony.
Yep.
You talk about appropriate development in that street. I'm just wondering what you're referring to.
All right. So,
sorry, Tony, if you could come back to the lectern. Thank you.
Look, when we moved into that street just a little over a decade ago, 11 years ago, they were all houses. Since then, there's been a huge number of development, and we appreciate that. They're big blocks, and we understand that. When we talk about appropriate development, we are looking at some developments that do not overcrowd the block, that do not look such an eyesore, a big concrete grey mass on the north side of the street. Now, if you have a look, for example, at number 18, I think it is, which has been a new development there. That's been a house that's been knocked down, and I don't think we got any objections to that. If you go down it, I think about 2 houses down from you, Richard, about 15, I think it is. Correct me if I'm wrong. Anyways, a new development there. House has been knocked down once again. It was a very appropriate development. I think there's 3 or 4 properties gone on to that. The residents are perfectly accepting of that. They seem to accommodate the neighbourhood and what we like. The parking is a huge issue. It is an enormous. It's dangerous to ride your bike now. It is a single lane street. And we just think giving these exemptions all the time is overkill, considering the size of these blocks can accommodate in a development which we think is more pleasing to the eye. Have a look at some of the recent developments in the last 5 years. Some of them are appallingly run down. As I said, the fences are collapsing. They are cheap rental properties. We do not believe that that's appropriate development. Yep. Also, the lack of green areas there as well. So, does that cover your question?
That answers my question.
All right, councillors, if there are no further questions, could I have a motion?
I'd like to move on. I'd like to move an alternative recommendation to the one that's in the agenda. My motion reads that a refusal to grant a planning permit by MPS 2016-923 be issued for the construction of 8 dwellings and reduction of standard car parking requirements for 16 Irvine Street, Brunswick West on the following grounds. I'll read them because they're not on the screen. 1. The proposed composition and appearance of the development fails to make a positive contribution to the public realm and does not represent high quality development, contrary to the objectives of the Design and Development Overlay Schedule 24 and the Moreland Neighbourhood Centre Strategy 2017. In particular, A, the building facade is not designed with the appropriate rhythm and proportion, that does not respond to the building's uses and context and does not contribute to the fine grain urban character. B, the proposal does not adopt a solid architectural expression that emphasises the street edge. Point 2, the dwellings 3 to 6 do not provide adequate private open space for the reasonable recreation and service needs of residents, which does not comply to clause 55054, private open space, of the Moreland Planning Scheme. And number 3, the provision of 10 resident parking spaces would not provide an appropriate number of car spaces on the land as required under clause 5206 car parking of the Moreland Planning Scheme and would adversely impact on street residential car parking. If I have a seconder, I'll speak to it.
Okay, Councillor Bolton, second.
Good. Well, actually, it's quite ironic that in fact the applicant raised basically the 3 points that I've raised when he was speaking in favour of the application. He said that this is an unusual, I quote, unusual looking development for this street. I think it is too. I think it is. I agree with him. He spoke about the fact that you get 24 square metres on some of the properties as open space. Well, when you have the ground open space, it should be 40 square metres. It's a reduction in what should be done. He said that the 3-bedroom apartments won't qualify for the second car space, which is a requirement. So they're the 3 points of my objection. They're the 3 things. I think it's out of character. I think that it doesn't provide enough open space on the site for some of the dwellings, and I believe that the waiver of car parking is not appropriate in this area. And yes, I understand that it's in a residential growth zone. The northern side of the street is in the residential the growth zone. It's true that council has put forward C171, which hasn't been adopted yet, that tries to remove it from the growth zone. But the southern part of the street is not in the growth zone. Southern part of the street is not in that zone. And obviously, people on the other side of the street are being grossly affected by the car parking as a result of the overdevelopment on the northern side of the street. So, I understand that probably other councillors have different views, but I think this one should be rejected, obviously, and that's why I've removed it.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton.
Thanks for that. I definitely support this alternative resolution. I think the relevant clause of the planning scheme indicates that if residential parking spaces should be reduced, it should only be on the occasion of exceptional public transport services or exceptional alternative transport services. I would argue this is not a site of exceptional public transport services. Yes, it is true there's a tram service, and yes, it is true there is a bus service going east-west. But when I ran a residents' meeting about a year ago or so in that area, a number of residents were talking to me about the tram short shunting, and so some people had given up using the tram and had reverted to using a car. I'm not sure if that's still going on, but that was certainly reported to me about 12 months ago. In addition, the bus service isn't that great. It's, you know, good that it's there, better that it's there than not there. But for instance, weeknights and Saturday nights, it finishes around 9 o'clock or so at night. So, you know, it means that a lot of people do require a car, people who have to do things late at night on a Saturday night or a weeknight, for instance. If you're a shift worker, you wouldn't be able to get home by bus, for example. In addition to that, I am suspicious of the car stacker. I'd like to wipe the car stacker out altogether, but that apparently is not a ground for rejection of an application. But I think the car stackers usually don't take all cars, all car sizes. And so that means that with a reduction in residential car parking plus a new crossover, and the car stacker not necessarily taking all size cars, means that the parking issues will be exacerbated on the street. I'd certainly like to ask councillors to reject this application, but if councillors feel tempted to grant the permit, then I think we need to add in an extra condition which covers the sorts of points that were raised by resident Mark Higginbotham just earlier.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Farnley.
I rise to speak against Councillor Kavanagh's notice of refusal. Just to clarify, that's against the refusal, so I will be moving the council officer's recommendation to provide a permit. In February last year, we sat at this urban planning committee and presided over 14 Irvine Crescent. I voted against that application. That was for 7 triple-storey dwellings. I voted against it because I thought it was an overdevelopment. I thought it was an overdevelopment then. I think it's an overdevelopment now. I think this is an overdevelopment too. But in reality, it doesn't matter what I thought. It didn't matter what the Urban Planning Committee thought. The judge at VCAT overturned our decision and provided the applicant with a permit. Now, I'm not an expert on VCAT, but I know about precedent, and that judge will take a look at preceding judgments and look at what's been passed and not want to over-contradict what's actually been passed. I'm happy to get that clarified yeah, sure, I'm happy to, I want to make sure I've got that right.
And there were some conditions that were set in the residents' favour.
Yeah, what happened?
Okay, sorry, we can't have discussions from the gallery.
But there was a permit granted, and that's what my concern is. We spent over $30,000 in legal fees representing there. Now, $30,000 for me can be provided to social cohesion programs, which I campaigned for at the last budget. It does a lot for the community. So I'm concerned that we're going to go through a process again, spend $30,000, and unfortunately come out with, as it's here, 8 dwellings on this site, which is an overdevelopment. I would rather not expend that $30,000 unnecessarily, and put that to good use.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Farnley. Councillor Aboud.
Okay, so I'm rising to support Councillor Kavanagh's objection. I just want to show you this. Is our council homepage. If I can do this upside down. Head to planning. Now, we're looking for amendments, okay? That was the wrong one. If you can open amendments, what you can then do is have a look at the Moreland planning scheme, okay? This is how contrived this is. Once you get to the Moreland planning scheme online, did that a couple of times, it's internet, so it takes a while. Okay, now we're on a government website. This government website says that you can see recent amendments. Now, we have asked for an amendment to this street, which is part of the reason why this is what this takes. Scroll all the way to the top now. List of amendments. For some reason, you've been started at the bottom of that list because what you need is at the top. Find what you want from the top. Now, this is interesting. This is July 25th of May 2000. What we want is all the way at the bottom for some bizarre reason. I don't know why it works.
Councillor Wood, could we just...
Yeah, it won't be a sec. Now, what happened on the 15th of May this year is that an amendment clause was put that says that in a general residential zone, which is the south side of Irvine Crescent, it will no longer be an issue if you don't want to include 35% of garden size in your development, okay? So while this council is making a position where we're saying that the north side of the street should be conditioned to look like the south side does, which at that time had the 35% of total garden, 35% of the lot size should have been garden. We've got crickets from the Minister for Planning. That's been the case for years. We've got contrived situations where if you're looking to object to any of this stuff, you need to know how to read a thesis. And we've got a position to take on this kind of development. I agree with everything that everyone said. It's just that some people take a different position on it. I think that I'm happy to stand here and say I object to this development. I object to the density. I object to the height. I object to the car stacker. I do agree that, yes, there is a $30,000 lawyer's fee potentially involved, but I think that if we were to be successful, it would be money well spent. I think that if you objected to 7 and this is 8, you should be objecting to this because this is more. Plus it has car stackers. So maybe Mr Hamilgreen will be our secret weapon in the VCAT chamber this time round when the member has to consider this application because this has car stackers as well.
Councillor, but if you could...
So I have no qualms whatsoever about taking a position to object to this development because I think it's completely unsuitable for the city.
Okay. Councillor Donny, would you like to speak? No? Okay, is there anybody else who would like to speak either in favour or against? No? Okay, Councillor Kavanagh.
Look, I understand councillors, some will have a different point of view and I fully respect it. Can I say though that I really do think that sometimes council underestimates their authority and the councillors do as well. You know, I think of the 2015-16 VCAT figures, planning figures. Council approved 1,700 applications and 95% of them stood. Right? So 5% of them, yes, were overturned at VCAT, normally approval by us and refusal at VCAT. There were a couple, I think there were 1 or 2 the other way as well, but most of the 5% are that way. You know, I think sometimes it's easy to get into a habit of saying, oh, what will happen at VCAT? What will happen at VCAT? I think it then, you know, I understand this sets precedents and I accept that, but I do think we've got to accept that what our role is in the process. We've got to say, this is our role, what do we think? And if you think it should be refused or accepted, that's fine. But I think we shouldn't underestimate our role. Yes, there is money involved in VCAT appeals, etc. I understand that. Money for the applicant, money for us, depending on whether we're supporting or refusing. But I'd also think that we shouldn't underestimate the power of the council, whether it be council officers under delegation or councillors around the table. I think we should just make up our mind, and if you support it, fine. If you don't, fine, and then let the rest look after themselves. Because I think otherwise you're always second-guessing what will happen in the future. I think it's best, I really do. I've come to that conclusion, and I must say when I first got on the council, I was a bit more like Councillor Farnley, thinking, oh, well, it's going to get up at VCAT or whatever. Whereas now I think, no, just make up our own mind. I'll make up my mind. Every other councillor will make up their mind, and let's go with it. Right? So on this one, I say, I think it should be refused. Also, the other one had 7 units. This has got 8 on the same size block. I actually think, you know, we've probably got a fair chance. But even not, that's just my view. I think it's unacceptable, and so there I'm going to throw it. You can say that's irresponsible with ratepayers' money if you like. I don't think it is. I think it's just supporting what I believe in.
Thank you. Okay, I'll now put that to a vote then. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. Okay, I will now take to the officer to outline the next steps.
Thank you, councillors. The committee's resolved to refuse the application at number 16 Irvine Crescent in Brunswick West. That notice will be sent to the permit applicant and all objectors. The permit applicant has a 60-day period in which to lodge any reviews at VCAT. If there's a review lodged, the objectors will be invited to be party to that proceeding. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll now move to the next report this evening, which is Champ Street Streetscape Improvement Plan D18 142327. I'll move to the officers to present the report.
Good evening, councillors and members of the gallery. My name is Andy Wilson and I'll just briefly take you through the proposal for the Champ Street Streetscape Improvement. On the screen there is the area in question, which is Champ Street and then the southern side of Murray Road to the north of the page. Some background. To fulfil the master plan commitment to review the 2006 concept plan, an updated concept plan has been prepared by Shea Group in consultation with council officers. To action the 2016 council resolution informing the review is heritage advice commissioned by council and prepared by Heritage Consultancy Context Pty Ltd, which assesses the heritage significance of the Champ Street streetscape, including the street trees that are included in Heritage Overlay Schedule HO287. So the summary of some of the advice provided in that report includes retention and protection of the river red gums and Canary Island date palms, reinstatement of a continuous row of evenly spaced river red gums, reinstatement of a pair of trees to frame the Champ Street entries to Pentridge, retain the spotted gums where they do not negatively impact on the river red gums, that spotted gums should not be replanted, the retention of the open ground adjacent to the road reserve within the Pentridge site as soft landscaping, and remove the existing car parking along the east side of Champ Street to return it to soft landscaping. On the screen there is the original concept plan that was approved in 2006, and then the next slide is the current proposed concept design. With regards to consultation, residents within Champ Street have been notified and given an opportunity to make submissions in relation to this proposed amended concept. In addition to that, the Coburg Historical Society, Pentridge Coburg Action Group, National Trust and Heritage Victoria were also notified. And we have received 9 submissions, mostly from residents, and 1 submission from Heritage Victoria. The issues that have been raised in those submissions include the removal of the spotted gum, which was granted approval under Planning Permit MPS 2015-206, planting of river red gums, perhaps not the most appropriate species due to their tendency to drop limbs, the removal of on-street car parking, density of tree planting on Murray Road, which will reduce views to the northern bluestone wall, and concerns about the hard stand area on Champ Street. The recommendation is that the Urban Planning Committee resolve to adopt the revised Pentridge Streetscape concept design, dated 26th of February 2018, revision P1, to supersede the existing concept plan dated May 2006, but subject to some changes, which include providing seating on the east side of Champ Street within the road reserve, adjacent to the pedestrian path, an on-road bicycle lane provided on the west side of Champ Street in addition to the east, which is already proposed. Remove the area shown as hard stand, which sits forward of the western wall and perpendicular to the southernmost access point on Champ Street, consistent with the Pentridge Coburg Design Guidelines and Master Plan, and streetscape improvements to the Pentridge Boulevard, generally consistent with the 2006 Pentridge Streetscape Concept Plan, showing a pedestrian path from Champ Street to the existing path to the east of Pentridge. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any objectors or submitters who wish to speak? Yep, come forward. State your name and address for the lectern. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Larry DeCarter from Champ Street. I'd like to start off by saying that the amendments are generally positive, but I do have a number of concerns. Firstly, the officer's recommendation for the construction of 2 bicycle lanes in Champ Street is overkill in my opinion. It simply allows more opportunity for cyclists and motorists to come into conflict. This is especially true of the west side of Champ Street where there's a large number of driveways. My second concern is about the removal of the indented parking on the east side of Champ Street and some loss of parking on the west. This will result in the loss of 52 or more car parks. These are currently both completely free to the public at all times of the day or night, and just as importantly, have no time limits imposed. They are especially valued by residents who live in apartments with only 1 allocated parking spot. This additional parking allows them to receive visitors. It's also of great benefit whenever there's a major function at Coburg Lake. The officer's report mentions that to offset this loss, additional public parking will be constructed as part of the Pentridge development within Building 9 as well as on Road D. However, it isn't stated whether these will be equivalent to those lost from Champ Street. Will they be the same in number? Will they be free of charge as is currently the case? Will they be accessible day and night, or will they be at the whim of the property owner? We just don't know. Mm-hmm. My last concern about the proposal relates to how it ignores the still ongoing efforts to find alternative solutions to vehicle entry at Road D that don't involve cutting down the spotted gum. Traffic island idea is still a viable option, but would require funding from the council to relocate underground services for the developer, such as stormwater pipes and electrical cabling. The council's own transport department agreed that a traffic island can be constructed in principle. The only question is whether the council will allocate funds to make this happen. It seems that the council is hoping this new streetscape design with trees in other locations will be enough to draw attention away from talk about money to save the tree. What we've been offered instead is a slow-growing sapling as a replacement. This won't grow to the height of the existing tree for at least 100 years. This should form part of the conversation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Michael, if you'd like to come up as well. Thank you.
I'm sitting around because I revised submission because of some recent developments. So Michael Hamill-Green from Kendall Street, Coburg. So I'm primarily talking about the effect of this amendment to the streetscapes concept design in terms of the effect on this tree. I think everyone should be aware of what is about to be cut down. So the main justification for this is that VCAT has given approval for it to be removed and replaced by spotted gum. But while making that ruling, I want to draw everyone's attention to the VCAT Commissioner and his admonishment of the planners. He said, quote, "The above circumstances, so there's the tree in the path of the master plan exit, invite the question as to why the entry-exit points in Champ Street were not assessed under the provisions of the Heritage Overlay as part of the consideration of the Pentridge-Coburg precinct as a whole. I find it curious that tree removal has not been, under HO 287, has not been treated as integral to the approval process for this precinct." So that's the VCAT member talking.
Okay, if we could just stay to the current application as well, we'll just focus a little bit.
So it's claimed that under there's no room for movement here, and that the council was bound by this, but obviously the Commissioner thought differently. Now, if you look at the October 2017 context report, that's what we're discussing now, isn't it?
Yeah.
It should be said, and I'm quoting from it, "New gaps in the river red gum date palm row of trees to accommodate new roads would impact negatively on the significance of both the Champ Street streetscape and the former HM Prison Pentridge by breaking the continuity and amenity of the linear planting and resulting in a loss of the row's integrity. However, this impact applies to the whole length of Champ Street with all its current trees," and I want to cite the VCAT Commissioner again on this point. He said, I quote, "I cannot conclude that the river red gums and the Canary Island palms are the only trees in the precinct that have heritage value. I find the statement of heritage significance refers to the character of all the street trees." So applying the principle that the October 2017 context report to the whole area. If it's a problem at that end, it's a problem where the spotted gum is.
Okay.
The proposal to have a river red gum replace the one that's being removed, that's in the path of the roadway. They're beautiful trees, but they do have the disadvantage of dropping limbs. And we can foresee a situation where there would still remain a big gap in the middle of Champ Street, because the idea of having big overhanging limbs on a frequently used road would be seen as probably unacceptable.
If you could just wind up now.
Yep. So despite the VCAT ruling, there is a possibility that the previous resident put up of having this tree retained. I met with the Director of Heritage Victoria just last week, 1.5 hour meeting with him on heritage matters. He made it quite clear that this master plan was done in consultation with the council. As a result of this, I think the council has an obligation to try and rectify the planning error that's been acknowledged, and go to every effort to spend a little bit of money to have a tree island created at the site. And
Michael,
the final thing I would
now.
wind up on in terms of this report is that it fails to mention the effect on the River Red Gum, where a new exit, which is not showing on the report, but is created by the hotel 19-storey tower. It's the council has said to VCAC that there's a danger to 20% of the root system of that tree. These trees grow up to 500 years. They can live for, and here we are threatening one of those river red gums. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other objectors or submitters who would like to speak? Thank you.
Hello, I'm Robert Stansel, and I'm from the Pentridge Community Action Group. I'm also a resident of Champ Street. Sometimes in these matters we may refer back to our Bible. In this case, the Pentridge Coburg Design Guidelines and Master Plan seem to be what is put us in this terrible position where we find ourselves now. But I refer to page 25 of that, where it says in a section that's talking about new buildings, but it says, among the western side of Champ Street, the eastern edge of the site, there is low-scale residential housing. Design measures to address this interface have included the retention of existing walls with new openings, unfortunately, and the next statement, retention of existing street trees and provision of new plantings. So there's quite a clear idea that the Champ Street is a very important street, being the front face of Pentridge. And when we're looking at this in context, we must acknowledge that we do have a plan that suggests that we should be honouring this heritage overlay land and protecting our trees. And Emeritus Professor has already discussed that we can't negate just because of a VCAT hearing. That doesn't mean it's the end of the issue for us anyway, and it can be a council workaround with the developer who you might find is happy to work on this. The other issue I'd like to perhaps point out is related to the plan that fails to show clearly what has happened in relation to the 19-storey hotel that is planned on the corner of Champ Street and Pentridge Boulevard. Now, this report that you're reviewing at the moment is currently, is after the VCAT hearing, which hasn't completed to this stage on the 19th storey, but clearly in that proposal there are further breaks in this overlay land where cars, trucks, namely rubbish trucks, will be allowed to traverse. So I'm assuming, councillors, that you have access to my letter that was sent. So I highlight that point 3 where that brings up that section that there's, and I quote, there's a clear conflict of the Heritage Advice Report, which states in its recommendations to retain the broad linear band of open ground along the principal Champ Street frontage of the prison walls as open space. This area should be retained as soft landscaping, grass or lawn. no hard landscaping, including a pedestrian footpath, let alone a truck road, to intrude into this space.
If you could just wind up now,
So
thank you.
this recommendation is consistent with the Pentridge Prison Conservation Management Plans by Alan Lovell in '96, and that new gaps in the River Red Gum also would impact negatively, as has already been stated. So I refer you to my letter. I refer you to read, and really Professor Hamel Green's statements are really worth digesting in full.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other objectors or submitters who would like to speak? Please come forward.
How do you do, panel members? My name's Jeff Knight. I live at Gaffney Street, on the corner of Champ Street. And look, the City of Moreland has some premium heritage assets. The Coburg Lake Reserve, the Champ Street Heritage Overlay, and the Pentridge Stockade. These, if you were to rate them, probably the Stockade, I would say, would be the preeminent world-class asset when you think of the magnificent. It's a spectacle to behold. And if you haven't, any of you, walked the length of it, I invite you to do that, because you can't appreciate the magnificent heritage we've inherited here, the craftsmanship, the historic significance to the nation's building of the settlers, and I'll leave it there. But we go on now. I say tragically that these three assets have been degraded. The amenity of each of them has been degraded in recent history. I put it to you, respectfully, that the Moreland City Council planning has accepted the developer's motorcar-centric vision, and that is something that I reject. And I believe that most people will also reject it if they have the opportunity to understand what's involved, the ramifications of it. Sadly, by acceding to the developer's agenda, the Moreland City Council has inadvertently perhaps created a precedent for more of the same. Because having breached the heritage overlay, this is the stuff that you defend, in a castle. This is the real deal, our crown jewels. When you just say, well, we don't mind, yeah, they are the crown jewels, but never mind, you can just permit over them. You've really compromised your whole integrity. I say too that council should think of the bigger picture, and while this Champ Street vision may have, as my colleagues have said, commendable aspects to it, the fact is that it's in the context of a bigger picture of public transport proximate to it. And that, as you would be well aware, better than anyone, is a massively overtaxed road, rail, tram. And there's one safety valve presently, which is to the credit of the Moreland City Council being developed, and that's the bike paths. And I've indicated here in pink the ones that are presently
If you could just wind up now, thank you.
I shall. But I propose that in my rejection of the plan as is, the plantings along Murray Road prejudice what I say is the irresistible connection to create a network of bike paths along Murray Road, along the east side of Champ Street, going down to Sydney Road and the shopping area.
Okay, thank you. I would say that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. If there's someone else.
Hello, Nick Dolby, Holbrook Crescent, West Brunswick. I regret the new openings in the bluestone wall. I regret the loss of existing mature trees. I wish they didn't have to happen. I do, however, strongly approve in this plan, new plan, of maintaining the soft open space adjacent to the walls, the formal garden, and removal of the handstand in front, the hard stand in front of the office buildings. I also strongly approve of the retraction of the shared path idea. Shared paths are often a poor compromise limiting pedestrians and cyclists, putting them in conflict with each other. This new plan separates them, and I'm glad it does so. However, it is amongst the Moreland Bicycle User Group, among other people in Moreland, we are wanting to see separated bike lanes, physically separated bike lanes where possible. And in a street the width of Champ Street, rather than having an online bike path, a bike lane, we would like to see a separated bike lane. We believe that it's engineeringly possible. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Are there any other objectors or submitters that would like to speak? Is there the applicant or representative of the applicant who wishes to speak? No? Are there any questions from councillors? Yep. Councillor Kavanagh.
Can I ask a question of Michael and Rob? Your opinion on the removal of the car spaces? I know it's something that hasn't been much concern, but I am interested in your views on that.
Sure. Thank you. I personally stand to lose on this one because I have a car that might lose its spot. But I did envisage this and planned for it by putting a garage with a remote control on the laneway at the rear of my property. Yes. But I see as more important is the re-establishment of a heritage overlay land, and it's for me, I don't have an issue with the parking except for the impact of events at the Lake Reserve. I don't think, I've talked about this to Michael, I think it was at one point, who said, well, it's not our problem. Parking, people can come by public transport, and that sort of answer. I don't know if that's a good answer, but I do think the whole issue of car parking for Lake Reserve events does need to be visited in some way. And it would be terrible if we had to build another car park to encroach on public land. But
for sure, no worries.
Thank you.
And can I just ask Michael's view on it, on the car spaces?
I'd share those comments, but there's another safety issue that I'm concerned about because of the reduction of car parking spaces. And being a visitor to Coburg Lake every day, and seeing what happens certainly on events and possibly some weekends. Cars, because they're running out of spaces in Champ Street and also in the car park at the Coburg Lake, they're beginning to park along Murray Road on both sides, and Murray Road has a 60k speed. It has heavy usage, and families use that park. You open the door on the driver's side, you can collect a car travelling at 60 just behind you. Kids might open it before properly looking. It's an exceeding. I can see a death occurring there any time. Once these car parking spaces are further reduced.
Thank you for your view, Michael. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further questions, I'll ask the motion to be adjusted. The councillor that would like to move. Okay, I'll move the officer's recommendation then. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second the officer's.
Okay. Okay, I suppose I'll speak to it then. I do believe that there are elements of this that are going to be quite good for the community. I am slightly concerned around losing the car spaces, but I think it comes part of our bigger integrated transport strategy and playing into the idea that we need to change shifts in modes. It is really close to a tram line, to buses, to cycling routes, and also to lots of residents that live close by and can walk. And I also believe that with Champ Street being residential area and other roads that would be parked on also being residential, it has the benefit by allowing people to actually have to walk a little bit further of benefiting our overall community health. I do support the idea of making sure that we've got nice, safe routes for cyclists along Champ Street and of beautifying that part so it has a nice integration into, our heritage area of Pentridge and also our lake and into our Coburg Activity Centre. Who was it the second? Councillor Kavanagh?
I'll second it. I'll refrain from speaking at the moment.
Okay, is there any other councillors who'd like to speak? In that case, I'll put that to Councillor Bolton, would you like to speak against the motion?
Yeah, I'm speaking against.
Against, yep.
Probably my main reason for speaking against is around the heritage overlay and the preservation of the line of trees without gaps. And I appreciate that probably through this report that we can't really do anything to do something about the issuing of the permit to bulldoze or destroy the tree, the spotted gum tree in front of Road D. But I am concerned that in addition to that, that there is an extra opening in the wall and road that hasn't been marked on, which I hadn't really thought about when I first read the report. So thanks for people who did the submissions, Michael and others. So it means that there will be another gap, and then to remove the spotted gum, but replace it with a new tree, which is very slow growing. It does degrade that sort of heritage overlay, because this is sort of like, it's not just any old spot. It's a very unique spot. I mean, it is, as the previous objector Jeff mentioned, this is sort of like the crown jewels, which is being degraded in many ways. And I'm speaking against mainly from the point of view of having a continuous line of trees without gaps in that area, and trying to preserve that heritage aspect of Champ Street, of the trees. Probably secondarily, I have been to various big festivals at Coburg Lakes Reserve, and this isn't my primary consideration, but I am aware there's some very big events that happen at Coburg Lakes Reserve which attract people from all over. I've certainly been to some different festivals, particularly in the migrant community and other communities, and because they're attracting people from all over, it means while some people will be coming by public transport, there's a lot that might not be coming because there's no direct routes by public transport. So I am aware that if the car parking goes, then it will go somewhere else, further and further away, and perhaps in some unsafe spaces. But yeah, I certainly think this report should be voted down.
Thank you. Okay, I'll now put that to the vote. So all those in favour? Against? I declare that.
I've abstained.
Can you abstain on this? Yeah. Abstain? Okay, I declare that carried. It's one abstention. Okay, I'll move to the officer to outline next steps.
Thank you, councillors. So the Urban Planning Committee has resolved to adopt the revised Pentridge Streetscape concept design, which will supersede the existing concept plan dated May 2006. Thank you.
Okay, there's no urgent business, so that concludes the business we have tonight. Councillors, members of the gallery, and to our viewers live streaming at home, I declare the Urban Planning Committee meeting closed, and it is 8:41 p.m. Thank you.
Chair.
My name is Michael Tortoni. I'm the founder of Melbourne's legendary jazz club, Bennett's Lane. I've recently moved to the very, very cool Brunswick. The Jazz Lab here on Leslie Street, Brunswick is Melbourne's new home of jazz. In my old club, you might have seen Prince for a late night set, or the Wynton Marsalis Band, or even the Harry Connick Jr. Trio. My new club will also host stars of contemporary music, starting with the Bill Frisell Trio for the Melbourne International Jazz Festival, as well as local stars. So drop in for some great music and a drink at the Jazz Lab.
My name's Leslie.